The Books Podcast, presented by Tim Hague.
This is the Books Podcast with me, Tim Hague, and I'm sitting with Mike Ripley in a pub, which that's pretty much your natural habitat, is it, Mike?
Yeah,
as a writer.
I'm part of the furniture, you might say, yeah.
So, the book we've got in front of us is Mr. Campion's Farewell. It says Margery Allingham's Albert Campion. Now, it's got your name on as well, but in smaller writing. Why is that? Why have we got two writers?
Well, we've probably got three, actually, which is why it's a bit crowded on that page. It's a continuation of a continuation. Continuation fiction is all the rage at the moment.
It is. Jill Painter-Walsh is doing Lord Peter Wimsey.
Has been doing for a while, yes.
Everybody does Sherlock Holmes and James Bond.
Yeah. And, of course, we've had... we're going to have Hercule Poirot.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
As well. And, indeed, in America, there's Mickey Spillane's. Mike Hammer is also being continued. But in my case, it's picking up from where somebody else started. What happened was Margery Allingham created the detective, Albert Campion, which is why it's quite rightly Margery Allingham's Albert Campion. It's her character. When she died in 1966...
Who killed her?
Breast cancer.
Oh.
That's a bummer. Kills the joke, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does, doesn't it?
But when she died, she left a book unfinished. It was called Cargo of Eagles. Now, her husband, or rather her widower, there was a chap called Philip Youngman Carter. She was actually Mrs. Margery Carter in real life. He finished it off and did quite a good job of it. Got good reviews. It was published posthumously 2 years after Margery died, but it was so well received that the publisher said, we can't have Albert Campion killed off with his creator, so can you keep them going? And Youngman Carter said, who was a journalist and a writer himself, said, I'll have a go. And he wrote two more, which were called Mr. Campion's Falcon and Mr. Campion's Farthing. Now, he then started a third, and then he died. And this was within 3 years of Margery dying. So we're in about 1969, and we've got 4 chapters of an Albert Campion novel, with no title, no plan, no scheme, no plot, nothing to say where it was going to go, and for 40-odd years, no author. The manuscript passed down eventually to the Margery Allingham Society, and I'm ashamed to say I've been a member for years, didn't know about it. But when I did find out about it, I foolishly offered to have a go at finishing it off, and they foolishly accepted.
Because you're a fan, aren't you?
I am a great fan indeed, and have been since I was a teenager. In fact, I worked out, I was reading my first Margery Allingham about the time she died, actually, in 1966.
So, there were only 4 chapters, because one of the things I looked at, I didn't know that when I started reading it. I was trying to figure out where you'd taken over.
That's what everybody they all try to see the join.
And it's fairly seamless, though. You've got the manner and the jaunty sort of dialogue. Down pat.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, a real true aficionado would be able to tell you that the first 4 chapters are the least funny. I hope they would say that anyway. Because
absolutely. Oh, you did make me laugh, but not in the first 4 chapters.
Because what Youngman Carter, Margery's widower, what he made up for in plots and speed and pacing of the writing, he definitely lacked in the humour. And the books he wrote are missing the Campion humour or the Allingham humour.
He makes an attempt, though. It's rather stilted.
He does, but it's not. It wasn't successful. That's the one thing all the critics say about his books, his version. They just lack the charm and the warmth. Because Margery was very warm in her humour. It wasn't nasty. It wasn't sarcastic. I think her husband was a bit more severe. So what I tried to do was put that back into his structure, if you like, and the setup that he'd left me. I was going to say plot, but he didn't really leave me a plot.
Did he have any input into her books when she was writing them, or did he just take them over?
No, he did. In the very early days, he collaborated with her a lot, or she always said he did, on the plots. And she, funnily enough, in the 1930s, she said she got all her best jokes from Pip. which he may have told good jokes, but he wasn't very good at writing them. But for the first few books, I think in the 1930s, she actually dictated them, and he wrote them down, and he typed them up, and cleaned up the copy for printers, for publishers. And there was a lot of involvement. Of course, he was also an artist, and he designed the book jackets, and a lot of things went into them. And there's a little figure of Campion on the back, which is actually drawn by Youngman Carter. That was his logo.
Well, tell me about Campion. I know he's been on TV. One of the Doctor Who's, Peter Davison played him on TV with Brian Glover playing the
wonderful Brian Glover, who was absolutely brilliant. There was the sidekick who was called Lug.
But quite often on TV they change the character. I mean, Morse was very different on TV than he was in the books. Tell me about Campion. He's not a policeman. I mean, he's not Inspector Alline, who the Niall Marsh one, who is
he wasn't much of a policeman actually.
He's not Lord Peter Wimsey either.
He's closer to the.
So who is he? What's his USP? What is the point of
He was
Campion?
initially set up very much as a reaction to, it's fairly obvious to me, to Lord Peter Wimsey, who first came out about 7 years before the first Campion book. And it was a sort of combination between Lord Peter Wimsey and Bertie Wooster. And Margery Allingham was a great P.G. Wodehouse fan, and at one point she actually wrote to P.G. Wodehouse saying, "Why don't you write detective stories?" And Wodehouse wrote back and said, "I couldn't possibly have anything nasty happen to Jeeves and Bertie." But so she was a great fan, and she was just like, she wanted to inject a gayness, that was the word in the 20s, and a lightness of touch, because Dorothy L. Sayers was very intellectual writer, and her Lord Peter Wimsey was,
She was intellectual. She did a marvellous translation of the Divine Comedy.
Yes.
Yeah. She was a genuine.
In fact, in one of the books, I can't remember which, one of the Wimsey books, I think one of the vital clues is given to you in medieval French. Now, I don't think there were very many readers who, they'd know it was a clue, but they wouldn't necessarily understand it. But Allingham was much more fun-loving.
They are lighter. Nothing terribly horrible happens.
Yeah, and I think the very first outing of Campion, he was a minor character in The Crime of the Black Dudley, and he was very much a bit of a spoof of a Lord Peter Wimsey character, and that gradually changed then into what him looking like an idiot became his best weapon.
Well, you play that card as well, a great deal. That is his USP.
Everybody underestimates him.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks he's just a twit or a toff or a fool. Margery played up to this this aristocratic hint that he was actually higher up the social ladder than Lord Peter Wimsey, because Albert Campion, as always said, is not his real name. His real name is just Rudolph K. And then as somebody begins to say K what, it stops. And she never gave it away, but it's hinted that he had real royal connections. And once in an interview with an American newspaper about 1939 or 1946, they said, who were you talking about? She thought it was George VI, of course, and as a joke, and they believed her. But it was very much, I think, based on the young Duke of York. But it was definitely had this definite royal connection, which led to a lot of his early escapades being involved with rather strange little kingdoms in Middle Europe and foreign exploits and things. But I say escapades because that's what they were. They weren't really detective stories. They weren't whodunits. He was an adventurer rather than a detective. So in effect, they really are sort of light-hearted thrillers rather than whodunits, for which I'm greatly relieved, because I don't think I could write a whodunit if my life depended on it.
We'll see about that. What you have written is very interestingly. I was going to say it's a period piece, but it's two period pieces, because it's set in 1969. And yet Campion's a man out of time then. You say earlier on, and I'm sure you've got it from her, that he was at prep school in 1910. Yeah, so he's a man in his early 70s at any rate.
He's 69.
He's 69 in 1969.
And he's going to stay 69 for a while if I've got anything to do with it. But no, the point, yes, I mean, his chronology is well documented. He was born in 1900, which is nice because it makes him one of the last Victorians. Mm-hmm. And there's a line in the book which is set in 1969, year of the moon landings. And
well, which of course, and again, one of the points you make is that when he was born, man hadn't flown in an
that's
aeroplane.
right. It was still a few years away from
on
actual
TV.
flying.
He would have watched.
They had TV, yeah.
It was an amazing thing to go from no flight to the moon.
And he was saying, look, I realise I'm old. I'm too old for the rough stuff and this running, shooting, jumping, chasing criminals business. But I'm not dead yet. And he does appreciate these things. And I think that was Margery Allingham's attitude. What inspired me was something she wrote about in an interview about what do you think about the young people and their pop music. This is about 1964. She said, well, it's awfully loud and raucous, and I don't understand any of it. But when I was their age, my parents used to say, what's that music you're listening to? It's loud and raucous, and we don't understand it, so it must be okay. And she was really, went with it, and she was interested in the energy it produced and the freedom it gave young people. Now, her husband, Pitt, was although he was the same age as Margery, was
I'll bet he didn't like it anything as much, did he?
He didn't.
You can tell in the first 4 chapters.
In his books, the books he wrote, there are some very rude comments about, and this was written in 1968, remember, about pop music and screeches and caterwauling and all this sort of thing. And I'd just love to be able to say that the people he was criticising then who were top of the pops or were number one in the charts they were headlining at Glastonbury in 2012, aged older than he was then.
You're right, though. Even in 1968, people were getting pop music wrong. I remember Anthony Burgess writing something very rude about the Beatles as late as that, when, frankly, he should have known better. He should have known that they were as good as they were. But he just couldn't see it. He was just blind to it. It's a period piece then in that it's set in 1969.
You're absolutely right. It's almost had to be treated like writing a historical novel.
Yes. But it also, a lot of the dialogue harks back to an earlier time. Yeah. And of course, in a way, although there are details from 1969, this story and Campion, the story could almost have happened in the 1930s.
Apart from the drugs.
Apart from the drugs, yes, but you could have used something else in there. And it could have happened in the 1930s because it's set in this little Suffolk village.
So that's
with a hierarchy of social strata and so on.
But to do anything else would be doing a disservice to the character, I thought.
Did you? You didn't consider bringing him into 2014?
No.
I mean, he'd be very old, but you could have brought him for... Characters are always staying the same age.
He'd be 114. I mean, he's not Hercule Poirot, who started at 68 and ended up about 130. The difference being, of course, Hercule Poirot is timeless. He's actually a timeless character. It doesn't really matter. The beauty of Campion was that Margery Allingham, in her lifetime, allowed him to age, and you saw him get older, and you saw him get married and have a kid, and get more and more mature, and his persona and his character changed.
It is one of the big decisions you have to make if you're going to have a recurring character.
And that didn't happen with any of the others, because Dorothy L. Sayers gave up on Lord Peter Wimsey before the Second World War, so he stayed almost in aspic. Now, Jill Peyton Walsh, who has taken on Wimsey, has actually moved him on to the 1950s, so he is older and a bit more wise and a bit more mature. But I already had that. I had a backstory of 40 years of that, and so to do anything different would be a bit dodgy. And what else could one do? And the scales of crimes and misdemeanors that he's involved in are very traditional. And yes, they could have been in the 1930s, but that's the essence of a good plot. I think it could have been at any point. It's how he reacts to it, and he's a man out of time, but not
out of touch.
It's not out of exactly. That's well put.
Yes. So we need to talk a little bit about not the plot, because I don't want to give anything away, but about the circumstances in which Campion finds himself having another jape, another adventure, and he's in this weird little village. Which have you based it on a real place?
I have, but that is typical. That's textbook Margery Allingham, having a weird place somewhere in East Anglia
with all these
she was so good
sinister denizens.
And that's straight out of her masterclass. She was brilliant at that. And the places that I grew up with in reading her books, and based on the Essex coast or the Suffolk interior, I thought I couldn't do any better. But what Pip left was a description. I mean, he didn't leave very much in terms of plot, but what he did leave was a description of this place, which he called Lindsay Carfax. And from the way he described it, that struck me as being, that must be based on Allingham in Suffolk, which I knew very well. I can't prove that it is, or whether, I don't even know whether Pip ever went there. I'm sure he did. But to me, it was so resonant at that place that I took that as my mental map, if you like.
I'll tell you what
once
else.
I had that in my mind, everything else followed.
Tell you what else Pip does, which you don't. It is one of the differences. Pip approved of some of the characters. He obviously really likes his Campion, the niece who is living in this village and so on. But the characters that he doesn't like, he really sneers at.
Yeah, some of them. There was one character that he obviously clearly liked, who's an artist, whom I didn't.
And you fixed that.
I fixed that, yeah.
Yes, you did.
But I can see that particular character being Pip's idea of what he was like 30 years before.
And this is a sheep area.
What at one point?
At one point, but there's a secret society still running the village to all.
It's almost like a guild.
Yeah,
except a secret one. But I mean, it's one of the famous Suffolk wool towns, of which there are many. Allingham really is one that became incredibly rich in the 15th century, and that's why you see in Suffolk these huge churches, absolutely massive flint churches,
and you've got one in Lindsay Carfax,
which are just ridiculous given the size of the population of the village now. But of course, then there would have been a lot more bigger population, and they were all incredibly rich. And the rich people put the money into the church to buy their place in heaven. And
Campion hears that there's some odd goings on.
Yeah,
so he just trolls in, doesn't he?
He's asked. It's put to him by his old mate, Charlie Luke, who's a policeman in London, who'd heard things on the grapevine. And he said, this is a bit of mystery, should intrigue you. And Campion says, well, not really very interested. He says, there's this weird place in Suffolk, and it's run by a secret society called the Carders, except they're not terribly secret.
No.
You know who half of them are. And so they're not very good at being a secret society.
Well, English secret society.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is like the Suffolk Mafia, which is not very good. Not very good at their jobs. And anyway, Luke tries to get him interested, and they say, well, one of the things is that there's a lady called Fitton, Eliza Jane Fitton, and Campion says, "Good, you don't mean yes? It's the niece of your wife, whose name was Amanda Fitton, and she lives there with this strange artist guy, and he's rumoured to be one of the Carders, and is what gets Campion interested. So he goes up there ostensibly as a tourist, and as soon as he arrives, he discovers that his niece has been involved in a near-fatal accident. Whether she was the intended victim or not is one of the mysteries that he starts to get the juices flowing. And Campion, even though now he's getting on a bit, he can't resist getting involved. And the whole point of the story, why it's called Mr. Campion's Farewell, is that he eventually realises that perhaps he's a bit too old.
Well, I got the impression you were writing him out, and you were retiring him. But Seven House have persuaded you to do another one.
It's not called Mr. Campion's Funeral. It's just called Mr. Campion's Farewell, because he's decided he's getting too old for this, and the world is changing, and it's changing faster than he ever thought it would. And it's time for him just to sit back and take a back seat. So he's retiring. It's a farewell to his life of adventuring, as he calls it. But it doesn't mean he's not quite ready for his pipe and slippers yet.
Mike, I fell in love with your writing. This is great fun. I really enjoyed
Good,
this.
thank you.
I fell in love with your writing because you had a series of books about a character called Angel.
Oh yes.
And
I've had to clean up my act for this one.
Yeah. Oh, but Angel was I adored Angel, and I'm going to ask if there are any more. If I count on my shelf, if my shelf is up to date, there were about 13 or 14.
15.
Well, the 15. Oh, I must be
You're missing
one.
Yeah.
I shall pop back and find a copy. So, but Angel, the last one was nearly 10 years ago.
No, actually 6 years ago, 2008. And that was done deliberately as an end to the saga. Not for people who don't know. I mean, one of the main characters in the Angel books was a cat. It was a psychopathic black cat.
Yes, called Springsteen.
And
because Angel was a musician.
That's right, and a lot of other things. But it got to the stage where it couldn't really keep realistically keep him going in real time. So the last book was not the death of Angel, but it was the death of Springsteen.
Which is a great title, isn't
and
it?
of course he goes out in a blaze of glory, solves the case, defends his master, and gets a Viking funeral. Now, if you get all that, it's called Angels Unaware is the book, and it coincides with Angel becoming a father.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the death of Springsteen and the creation of a young angel.
Yeah,
Angelette.
You've tried to.
So it's like the circle of life.
You've tried to finish Angel before. You got him married, and you thought that
married
might
off.
be
Yes,
enough.
and that didn't work. Everybody wanted him back, so he had to come back. But no, he's not dead. He's different. He's in a different place. He's moved on. He's now living in Cambridge, and he's working. Has a job for an all-female private detective agency.
Well, I'm going to organise a write-in campaign to persuade you.
Oh, I
bring Angel back.
I mean, I haven't killed him off, and the books are now all being reissued again, and so they're coming out gradually. In fact, we've got must have 11 or 12 of them out by the end of this year, and they're all going out as e-books. So for the first time, so we're getting a few new readers, and there is talk of a short story anthology with all the Angel short stories and some other short stories that I've done coming out later this year. Don't know whether that'll come off. I hope it does. But there are no plans for a new full-length novel.
Well, you've got the new full-length Campion.
Yes.
Mr. Campion's Fox, I think it's going to be.
That's the next one.
When's that one going? Because this is already out. Mr. Campion's Farewell is already
came out in April. Yeah.
When is the next one?
Fox hopefully will come out about this time next year.
Jolly
May
good.
Or June.
Well, I will look forward to it. I'm certainly going to read it. Mike, I'm picking the book up now. My copy is a biggish paperback, and it's $11.99.
And that's
hardback.
not actually out yet.
No, I know it's not. But the hardback is out now, and
Yes.
I recommend it.
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That was the Books Podcast with Tim Haig. The Books Podcast is produced by Green Shoot. You can find out more at www.green-shoot.com, and Tim can be contacted on tim@green-shoot.com.